Hi guys, my name is Celestial. Today we're reviewing Nilou as a Bloom team, who is Bloom. Bloom is a niche but incredibly strong mechanic in Genshin Impact. Bloom requires Dendro application, which then, with Hydro application, spawns cores that explode and can deal self-damage. However, Nilou, who is a Hydro sword user, relies on HP scaling in her talents and skills to boost these reactions. Her skill allows her to apply Hydro application in a set interval, and damage based on max HP can be charged into something called a Purette state when you use her E skill about 3 to 4 times. Passive converts Dendro cores into bountiful cores, which have increased damage in AoE, cannot trigger Burgeon or Hyper Bloom, and she can convert up to 30,000 more damage for Bloom cores. This, of course, gives Nilou HP scaling, making her incredibly strong on Bloom team. Her ultimate is an AoE that applies Hydro damage based on her HP, then ticks after a set interval, which is less relevant for Bloom teams, but it's still a nice additive Hydro damage. Now, this is important to note. Nilou is high reliant on her 5-star signature weapon key, as it converts HP to EM. However, it's a really important feature of Bloom teams is off-field bonuses, which Nilou has both in her skill and her weapon. Hydro effect from Purette Sight will apply on other characters, and the HP to EM conversion will apply on other teammates. This is vital, since Bloom does not scale off it, but instead EM. The more elemental mash Nilou in her party has, the more consistently higher damage you will achieve. Now, as weapons, 4-star variants that aren't as good but free-to-play friendly, such as the Sapwood, which gives elemental mastery and elemental recharge on its secondaries. There's also Zyphos Moonlight, which is also good as it has some nice EM, gives some ER to spam ultimates, or the 3-star variant that you can get in Liyue called the Dark Iron Sword, which unfortunately, there's no sword besides the key that has HP, as that's as a secondary stat, which is arguably probably the most important stat for Nilou, at least for Bloom teams, because you want that extra HP. As for artifacts, ignore what I have on her equipped right now. This is something I was testing, and I'm just having really good HP rolls, so I never swapped these out for a different set. But technically, you have different artifacts you could build in Nilou. There's the Paradise of the Lost, which will boost Bloom. It has off-field bonuses too, but it will only stack up to 4 times based off of its passive, which is by triggering reactions. So you only need one character on a Bloom team that uses this set, because it can't stack more than 4 times. Uskaska's Glow, 2-piece, and the 2-piece from Tenacity, which will give you 40% more HP in total between the two. If you have the key, this is even more amazing because you'll get more EM from your HP. As for Elemental Resonance, 2 Dendro characters for 50 free Elemental Mastery, 2 Hydro characters for 20% more HP for the whole party. So everybody stays alive longer, and if you have the key, you get more EM. One of the best teammates for Nilou is arguably Nahida. She's a free Dendro application, and her skill links enemies, which allow Bloom to damage up to 8 enemies at once from one explosion, not including the fact that the AoE can affect multiple enemies. Try Karma Purification. The stats from linking enemies can also trigger every 2.5 seconds, which is great. That's just free Dendro application, along with Nahida's crazy amount of elemental mastery that she gets, and her skills also scale off of elemental mastery for the most part. Her ultimate will increase the duration which Bloom cores last, making it easier to refresh skills and still have Bloom happen. And of course, her signature weapon, 1,000 Floating Dreams, is amazing. It has an off-field elemental mastery bonus that benefits the whole team. So it's just free EM out of her. Of course, there's alternatives to that. There's the Width, which is a bit of RNG. It's about 30% of the time you'll get 480 EM, but for Nahida, because it's based off of when she takes the field every 30 seconds, it's a little random. There's the Fruit of Fulfillment, as it has an off-field bonus. The EM is a little less noticeable. There's also Sacrificial Fragments, where EM's secondary stat, or Wandering Everstar, which converts EM to attack. This makes Nahida a sub-DPS for Nilou Bloom if you wanted her to be a sub-DPS. Now, there isn't really a lot of flexibility here for artifacts, but you want Deep Void Memories Nahida, as Bloom is considered Dendro damage, so you want to shred as much Dendro defense. And while this only lasts for a couple of seconds after Nahida uses her skills, it'll still give you maybe enough time where a few Bloom cores will bypass that defense shred. Now, another good Dendro character to use with Nilou that arguably, in my opinion, is one of the best is Baizhou. and due to the self damage from Bloom, he's a really good healer for this case. He has great Dendro application. His skill attacks 3 times. His ult constantly refreshes the shield, and it shoots a snake projectile every time. And while his shield isn't like Zhongli's shield where it just protects you, it's stagger resistance because it will break, it'll shoot a projectile, and then it refreshes. So it keeps healing you, but it's enough to block some of the Bloom damage. And while his shield is active, upwards to 50,000 of his HP can be converted to about 2% per 1,000 HP for Bloom reactions. This totals to 100% more Bloom damage, so it's just free Bloom damage. And this will last about 6 seconds after his ultimate ends, because it's based off of refreshing his shield. And his healing will scale off of his max HP, but his actual damage scales off of attack. So Baizhou's he's a little weird, but for a Bloom team, you only care about HP in this case. Now there's 2 weapons you could use for Baizhou. There's the Jadeful Splendor, which isn't that amazing, especially for Bloom, but it is nice. You get off-field elemental damage, you get some elemental recharge when his shield refreshes. A lot of people seem to not understand that, yeah, the passive only functions for 5 seconds, but because Baizhou's shield refreshes, passive refreshes that elemental bonus until the ultimate ends. And it's also an off-field bonus, so it works on other characters when Baizhou's not on the field. It just has to be his shield. Now, the free-to-play option is Prototype Amber, which is probably a must for him if you don't have Jadeful Splendor, which most people probably don't. It's not that great of a weapon. It's craftable, Prototype Amber is, and it's one of the few catalysts with HP scaling, so you definitely want it. Now, artifacts, he'll benefit from the same artifacts Nilou does, because we care about HP in this case, especially if you have the key on Nilou. But Paradise of the Lost works too, but just remember it doesn't stack like I mentioned earlier. He'll use the same artifact. Now a great second Hydro character to use with Nilou is Kokomi, and she's interesting as a secondary Hydro character because she'll also provide more healing to counteract any damage you might take both from Bloom and from enemies. She also is really good at Hydro application. Now, the game doesn't list the Hydro application for Nilou's E, and Kokomi's jellyfish, we don't know the intervals on those, but they are slightly offset, I guess, based off of when you cast the abilities. They're constantly getting Hydro application between these 2 characters, and Kokomi's jellyfish will stay on the field even when Kokomi leaves, so it's an off-field skill for Kokomi. And this will allow rapid Hydro application with your Dendro application. If Baizhou's shield act, then you're going to constantly get Bloom reactions. It basically just spams explosion. Crazy. Now, all of Kokomi's skills, thankfully, scale off of max HP, which is why, again, the key is amazing on Nilou. It makes team comp so powerful. So Kokomi could get free EM from that too. Now, her signature weapon is Everlasting Moonlight. It is probably the best weapon for Kokomi, but again, most people probably don't have it because it's just one of those niche signature weapons. It allows Kokomi to do a little extra damage if you want her to be an emergency sub DPS on her ultimate. But of course, Prototype Amber, which is craftable, again, is another useful one. Catalysts just don't have a lot of HP substats. As for Artifact, you could use the same ones you use on Nilou and Baizhou, or you could use Ocean Hued Clam, which is free damage. It can do upwards to 30,000 damage, and it actually scales off of elemental reaction damage, but not elemental mastery. So if there's any future effects that influence elemental reaction damage, this could actually benefit the Bloom team. Now, for mechanic, the rotation I do is Nahida, Nilou, Baizhou, then Kokomi, and then I just loop it. You can do your ultimates whenever you think appropriate, but try to get Baizhou's out as quick as possible. Usually when I rotate back to Nilou, I use her ultimate, and then sometimes I'll start with Nilou and then use Nahida, but generally it's better to link the enemies first before you use Nilou because you just get a better Dendro core production. Now there's a lot of alternative characters you could use as a free-to-play player. Maybe you don't have some of these 5 stars, especially like Baizhou, who's less popular. Barbara could replace Kokomi. HP scaling in her Hydro application. She's melee range. Ultimate provides a lot of healing. Pretty standard. She's also Catalyst. Barbara's a good choice. Yelan as non-free-to-play option is also great. Yelan's high HP and her ultimate is one of the best Hydro applications in the game. She's arguably on par with Kokomi. You just lose some healing, but you can get some incredible amounts of damage. You can make her a good like sub DPS for a Bloom team if you don't want to completely rely on Bloom for damage. And if you have her signature weapon, she'll provide even more HP. However, you need a lot of ER on Yelan to keep her ultimate constantly going. Otherwise, it actually punishes the Bloom team by not having enough ER. I didn't realize that when I made Yelan. I built her for Shogun, and not Bloom. So I actually am missing quite a bit of ER on her. Jingchu's also a good option. He's always a great support. He's Hydra application. He heals based off his passive, about 6% of his max HP. Although he is mostly attack scaling on his skills. Candace, an interesting choice. Not a popular support character, but she's actually pretty crazy. I'm actually going to work on building her. She scales off of HP. She gives swords, claymores, and polearm users Hydro Infusion on her ultimate. And when you change characters, it shoots a wave out up to 3 times. It's a good free-to-play option because you can get more Hydro application on you if you want to be more hands-on and actually use her normal attack. But Candace is definitely worth it. She also has some like crit integrated in her constellation, so it's interesting. Again, another character where Nilou's signature weapon is like massively important. As for Dendro characters, because you have to have 2 Dendro and 2 Hydro characters, Yao Yao is amazing. Ult to Baizhou, she has a Dendro application and a DOT heal, ultimate to AoE, and she scales off of HP. I like to use Moon Piercer on her, but you could also use like Castle on her. She's a great ult to Baizhou. I see on the Niloumains subreddit that a lot of people use Yao Yao. Now Kale, not that great at Dendro application, but she is a good free-to-play option. She can replace Nahida. Her ultimate will deal Dendro damage, and the duration increases by 1 second when bloom occurs. So, you know, it's a little crazy. And her constellations are pretty decent too. You can get extra Dendro application through her constellations. So Dendro Shower is another option. The AoE increases in the presence of Hydra. The EM gets converted into elemental damage via the Traveler's passive. Again, he's a sword user, so there's not a lot of HP options for sword users. I do not recommend Technari if you got him from standard banner or a failed 50-50. He might take too long to apply Dendro, and it just is detrimental to a Bloom team. You could try it, but also he's quite ranged, and you want it to be in melee range. Use abilities are all melee range, and same with Candace and even Yelan. I mean, you really probably not a good idea to use Technari. It might theoretically be possible if you're able to spam his ultimate at the cost of maybe some damage, but it's still really risky and it interrupts the flow of the rotation for Bloom. Kiara is also a really good choice. Ultimate spawns these Dendro cores similar to like Please Bomb, but like all over the place. Please Bombs, but instead Dendro. It's sort of like a double Dendro Bloom effect at this point. She's an X4 star I'm also building along with Candace. So her passive also gives her HP into damage, which does not have a limit. So I will do a follow-up with Kiara. I've seen some crazy videos of people doing over 1 million damage, which I haven't seen very many characters do that besides Hu Tao, Eula, and Shogun. Now, as for constellations, there's not really a lot of options here. Nilou's C2 is best for Bloom because the rest of her constellations are mostly DPS Nilou, which who cares if you're building Bloom. Her C2 will shred Hydra Res and Dendro Res, which is actually kind of insanity. The only other constellation that might make a difference is Nahida's C2, which she turns Dendro actions with a fixed crit rate of 20% and crit damage of 100%. So if I'm doing, 27k damage per Bloom, I might get almost 40k damage, maybe. Additionally, Nahida will strip 30% of res from enemies during the reaction, so that's kind of crazy. I don't know if resistance shreds stack, but if that's the case, Deepwood Memories, C2 Nilou, and Nahida, hypothetically, you could shred almost 90% of an enemy's Dendro resistance when you swap to Nahida, and you have Bloom happen, so then you change the rotation to Nilou then Nahida, which, if you think about it, that's kind of insane. A 90% shred of resistance is like, you're almost removing their resistance at that point. Now, a little less important, but I realized this at the end of making this guide, that C2 Baizhou applies Dendro damage every 5 seconds, which and C4 gives EM to the whole party, and C6 provides more damage based off of HP. And I don't quite know how C2 works, but it is just free Dendro application, so it might act worth it, but obviously C2 Nilou is number one. Well, actually, C2 Nahida is number one priority if you have her, and then C2 Nilou, and then C2 Baizhou maybe, but constellations are really not worth it if you're trying to build teams. They're really just optimization. I would say technically Nahida is probably number one priority at the end of the day, just because you can use Nahida on other teams, and C2 Nahida is just built different. But anyways, hope you enjoy this, post more guides, and give a like and subscribe. Bloom!